As we are recording this, the hostage deal is underway. And despite the pure excitement in the air here in Israel, maybe for the first time in 2 years, so many people are confused and angry about this. We have questions, and important ones. Like, why did Hamas finally cave to this deal, which is so much worse for them than the previous offers? Did Netanyahu delay this whole thing intentionally for political gain? Could this deal have happened last year already? Does this mean the war kind of just ends? What's the price that we're going to be paying here in Israel? Why are the Israeli protesters who are so focused on the hostages still raging at Netanyahu? And why are the pro-Palestinians so mad at a deal that rebuilds Gaza and supposedly stops the war? We've got a lot to answer. This is the Era K show on JNS TV. Let's dive right in. Have you noticed the silence from Hollywood, from all the haters, those who screamed about genocide, who literally haven't shut up, sorry mom, in 2 years? Have you heard how silent they have been in the face of a peace deal that supposedly brings peace to Gaza, that allows for rebuilding and financial aid, and if we're being honest, the continuation of Hamas, their most favorite organization in the whole entire world, and the release of 2,000 of their kidnapped heroes, i.e. prisoners, from Israeli prisoners in exchange for 20 of our hostages. And yet, nada, not a word from them. You would think they're celebrating this, but nope, total silence. Look, I want to be really clear. I don't think this deal is actually going to work. I'm hoping the hostages come home. But I don't think there is ever really a chance for peace in Gaza. I believe the entire premise of Palestine is built on the destruction of Israel, and that this deal, as amazing as it may sound to us, doesn't align in any way with that goal. Israel's still standing, and we're, unfortunately for them, standing on a lot of their ground. And I think they have been presented with the option for peace so many times. They're the ones who have refused it, despite it being handed to them on a golden platter. That means something. Had they wanted any form of peace over the last 2 years, the hostages could have been home, and all of this would have been behind them. It brings us, this idea, to the question of, could this deal have been done before? And the answer to that, despite what you may see on the media, is an absolute no. In no way. This is not a case of Trump finally deciding he has had enough and pulling the cards to get this deal done. In theory, this could have been closed last year if he had just wanted it. Let's go back and remember the context of everything that's going on. You'll remember Biden, our wonderful friend in the American government. So in June 2024, he demanded in his deal that we would withdraw from most of Gaza and get only the humanitarian hostages back in phase 1. Like, as if all the hostages are not humanitarian. Then in phase 2, we would leave Gaza completely and not get any of the bodies back in return. Think of what that would have meant for Hamas. Israel completely withdraws. They get to keep bodies as collateral, and yet they refuse that deal. In the next one, under Trump, Witkoff's original proposal, half of the deceased hostages would have been returned. Okay, half, not all of them. And a 2-month ceasefire would have commended to negotiate how the war would end. And then the IDF would withdraw from most of Gaza, a lot more than it currently is in this deal. Okay, also, much better for Hamas. In today's deal, all of the hostages return, including all of the Bosby, and we don't leave half of Gaza. And not because we want to occupy them, but because we need to ensure that Hamas actually disarms, and we have to be in the area to see that that happens. So why would they agree to this deal that is by far the worst one that they were offered, especially now that their main leverage, the hostages, will be gone? Well, that's because they now finally only have one small chance of survival left. And to do that, they just need to surrender. You see, pretending this deal could have happened previously is just that. It's pretending. The only thing that really changed here is that Hamas have finally realized they have no chance of survival left. Like nada. Our soldiers are in Gaza City, their final stronghold. Israel is taking out the leadership, left, right, and center. And to top it all off, the US is now using its leverage to push Hamas funders and supporters to just get the last hostages home so we can move forward. We have destroyed them. We've advanced militarily a tremendous amount during this war. And it's all of these factors combined that finally got the terrorists Hamas to change their tone. Despite the media trying to manipulate us, it was Hamas who have been responsible for the hostages not coming home throughout the whole war. And the left here is trying to pretend it was really Bibi, but we now see that that is true. It was nothing to do with our politicians. It was to do with them. Hamas finally understanding them. They finally caved after an immense amount of pressure. Maybe that pressure could have been put on them to begin with. Well, you could say that, but only if we had given up really our ace card of the hostages, something Bibi was adamant not to do. You can argue that that's a mistake, and I don't know if I disagree with that. But the war could have been done in the first few weeks. That's fair. It's a legit argument, but also realize look at how far we have come in these 2 years. How much deeper and significant the win has been because we waited and pushed for the hostages to come home. Iran, Syria, Lebanon, none of that would have happened if we had done that tactic at the beginning. It's not always so clear cut. Hamas gain almost nothing by this deal, except for potentially surviving. That is a big issue. We'll touch upon that. Because they will never really allow for Gaza to be rebuilt. As they return to the areas in Gaza City that we have forced them out of, and the footage this morning is very frustrating, I'm gonna agree with that, they're executing any Palestinians who actually try to fight against them, because as always, we know Hamas are the real threat to everybody. By the way, this is the real reason the pro-Palestinians aren't celebrating this peace deal. Because without the Palestinians suffering, yup, if the Palestinians aren't suffering, they have no cause. If Hamas just ends and there's prosperity, utopian as it sounds, how will they continue to hate the Jews? Honestly, I'm not too worried for them, though. Like, I'm sure they're coming up with something now as we speak. Another blood libel. Now that I think about it, the whole controlling America thing is what I believe Qatar started planting when they realized the war would probably end soon. Notice how it popped out of nowhere? The voices on the right that just hate Jews in Israel so much, despite not caring at all about the Palestinians, they're incited and they're angry and they're everywhere online. I mean, we can bet that already now the pro Palestinians are preparing the press to go into Gaza and document and share with the world the lies of the atrocities, and that Israel is very much not thinking or preparing properly on that front. That is my main argument against Israel in this whole thing. We have not done the PR war properly. But that brings us to the real serious question of what now? More than the hostages coming home. And guys, I can't even tell you. I can't even tell you how excited I am for that footage. I really, truly hope and pray that our leadership takes the second stage of this war very, very seriously, despite the immense amount of pressure that they'll be under to just end it. Hamas has got to go, but I don't think it's going to be simple to do. Hamas would only agree to give up their ace card if they knew that they have that chance of survival. And they believe that our government will cower and not actually have the guts to finish them. They believe this enough that they are releasing the hostages. That should make you really furious. Really, really, really furious. That's how lowly they think of our government, that they're willing to now give up the hostages because they believe that they can continue to exist. And now that the hostages hopefully are no longer there, we have no excuses to not finish the task we had set out for ourselves. One of the big prices we are paying for the hostages to come home is the release of 2,000 prisoners. And I don't think this has gotten enough attention. I read what some of them have done. And I know some of the people that they have killed, and it's making my blood curl. So many families that I know are suffering in silences. The hostages have dominated the conversation, but having your father's murderer out on the loose is a whole different type of trauma. And it's an unimaginable letdown by the government. They're just not really talking about it. It's become an accepted norm that we released thousands of murderers who could potentially become murderers in the future in exchange for our Jewish bodies. Guys, this confirms to Hamas and to terrorists everywhere that taking hostages is a clear strategy. So it's the one thing in this deal that we totally caved on. I do have to say that there's one thing that's important to note, and that from what I understand, although it might not be exactly accurate, there's a strong clause not allowing them into Judea and Samaria, only back into Gaza and abroad, the prisoners I'm talking about. Let's hope that the Mossad has the trackers on them and maybe some beepers for short-term communication, if you get the gist. Maybe that's the silver lining, that they're a little bit less protected once they're released out of prison. Wishful thinking, but one never knows. Additionally, it's my understanding that many of the families of the deceased hostages have been informed that finding all the parts of their loved ones is not proving to be so simple. The return of these 20 bodies is not exactly going to be like that. As heartbreaking as it sounds, Turkey and the UAE, Israel and the US and Egypt, they've sent a special delegation to try and find them And that's why this deal has been delayed so much and they want returned to us straight away. So they're looking for these body parts, but it's not clear if they're ever going to come home. And we now also have more hard news. A Nova survivor took his life. A soldier that was injured on October 7th died yesterday, succumbed to his wounds. There are a lot of ramifications to this deal. There are massive prices that we have paid for this war. And the question is, how do we make it all count? And so, as I said in last week's episode, we still don't know exactly what stage 2 looks like, but it's definitely coming. There is no real ceasefire yet. I mean, we have stopped fighting. We're on day 3 or 4 for the time being. But once the hostages are out, we will know. Is there a Trump Bibi style bluff around the corner? And we move into a war that truly takes out terror in Gaza? But like actually? Or are they just going to cave and try wrap this up? You already know what I want. But regardless of what happens, I want you to remember something and to feel that this has been an astounding win for us. We have learned so many lessons, too many to count. And that most importantly, we're really starting to understand that Hamas is an idea that can't be eradicated. Not really. And internally, we have a lot of hard work ahead. Even if Gaza doesn't move into this peaceful thing we all dream of, let's not pretend that we aren't miles and miles and miles ahead of where we were come October 6th. I personally think that peace is a form of illusion. In the same way that happiness is not a permanent state, it's constantly shifting and changing and needs to be worked at all the time for it to be kept. What I will say is this: everything that we thought was impossible, we have seen Trump and Bibi magic out of their hat. There was no way we could take out Iran without Israel basically being destroyed. Look at what happened. There's no way that the hostages were coming home. Not all of them. Look at what's happening, hopefully. And now I believe that there's no way there'll be real peace in Gaza. But maybe they have something up their sleeve. Elections are coming up in Israel, and that will definitely impact Bibi's moves. It's a mess over here. I mean, just on Saturday night, as the whole Zionist world was sitting around with bated breath, waiting to hear how and when this deal is moving forward, as families whose murderers are being released navigate the complicated feelings of happiness for the hostages and fear for the future, and as Netanyahu is out there visiting injured soldiers and the centers are being prepared for the released hostages, and the news reaches us of this Nova survivor who's taken his life, and of a soldier who was injured back in October 7th who just passed away from his injuries. Those at the hostage square in Tel Aviv were sitting around waiting for Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner's speech. He gets up on the stage after he and Jared Kushner had spent the entire day in Gaza, and he starts to say, Witkoff, by the way, who I have not held back in my criticism of, has been instrumental in the deal getting to this point, okay? Him, Kushner, Ivanka, Trump, Bibi, Derma, all of them, they've done an enormous amount to make this happen. And he's here at the behest of Trump. And as he gets up and he mentions to the crowd, I mean, Bibi and Derma gave up so much. Thank you for everything that they've done to make this happen. The crowd goes wild, not in a positive way. They drown him out with shouts of boos at the disgrace that he mentioned Bibi positively. They didn't do this when he mentioned Erdogan in the speech. You know, the dictator who runs Turkey, who's literally trying to eviscerate us. But only for Bibi and Derma. And I think that tells us a lot about where we are right now as a country. Look, I get it. I understand the claims that Bibi has delayed the war intentionally for his political gains, that he can stay in power. And honestly, on a personal level, I kind of think that's bogus. But let's just say for argument's sake that it's true. I really have a serious question for everybody that hates him. Who do you propose replaces him? Who is the person who could have led us through these insane times? A person who's currently in our government. Any of the lefties? Are you nuts? Of course, he holds some form of responsibility for October 7th, and we can debate to no end how much of that responsibility is his. I think everyone in the government does. Everyone who didn't enforce security over the last 70 years, and that's the IDF and the Shin Bet and the Mossad. Everyone. But that being said, thank God he is the one currently in power, as I truly believe there is no one in the Israeli political sphere or in the international political sphere who could have held a candle to the good he has succeeded in doing. Yes, it hasn't been straightforward, it hasn't been easy, it hasn't been comfortable, but he has done a huge amount for us. And what's so sad is that the hatred towards this man in this country is unprecedented. Enough that they're willing time and time and time again to shoot the whole country in the foot just so that they can keep on hating him. They won't even give him credit for the hostages returning, which is total Insanity. I believe that if and when you find only one person to put all the blame on, you're probably wrong. When things do go wrong, there are always multiple factors, and the obsession and focusing on him as the main reason is deranged. So much so that Hamas literally used this against us. Do you remember all the hostage videos? They always mention Bibi Netanyahu, or almost always. They always mention putting pressure on him or trying to get rid of him because they realize that this man, this strong man who's led us to this point, is actually their biggest threat. And this is where Bibi finds himself right now, hated by a lot here in Israel, and not to mention in the States, who think that he's controlling America. And Trump as well, by the way. He has a mess of his own to deal with. Anti Semitism is rising like crazy. His MAGA base is growing in its anti Israel sentiment, as many of us are aware of, and there are many other things that he needs to get done. All these factors will contribute to how the war moves forward. Will we have peace deals? Will the Abraham Accords thrive? Will our economy get stronger? Our soldiers heal? Our borders stay strong? Will we get to the real win that we owe humanity to destroy the evil of this world and keep the Jews safe? All of these questions are still unknown, and we are trying to figure it out. Again, my hope and prayer is that the hostages, this release is literally just stage one, and that our government doesn't pull back, that we really go in and finish the job as much as it seems impossible. Because once again, how do you destroy an ideology if it's not just physical things? And Hamas is that. It's an ideology and it's permeating everywhere, which is why I've said on here and I'll continue to say the PR front is now going to become just as important. We have to eradicate this evil from within, not just wait for them to surrender their arms, because that's what they're up against. Stage two basically says either Hamas completely surrenders and is allowed to survive and scatter and maybe go to Qatar to hopefully stay safe, or they don't, which is probably quite likely, and Israel decides to go all in, but now they don't have the hostage leverage over us, which means that we could go way further militarily. And so all of this is up for debate, and all of this is confusing. And we have a lot to demand from our government and to watch and to make sure that we do the right thing for us and for our children. But as for us right now, we have to all remember that we trust in God above, not in man. It would be amiss not to mention how, whilst October 7th is now behind us, the Jewish holiday that coincided with October 7th is on Tuesday. 2 years from the day, the terrible atrocity of what happened to us, on the day that we're supposed to celebrate God's word. And God has now decided it's time to get the hostages home and to change our judgment, to annul the decrees. 2 years exactly. And God has amazing things planned for us this year. I can really feel it. The terrible times are hopefully behind us as we move into unapologetic warriorism, until we move forward into fighting for the truth and not cowering no matter what. And I just hope and pray that we have the right leadership, despite all of the considerations that comes with the elections and all of the political and geopolitical drama that's going on. I really hope that they make the right decisions and we get the win that we all truly deserve. I'm Ira, and I will see you next time.